For 9 years, billionaire Elias Crane hadn't let another soul touch him. Not a handshake, not a pat on the shoulder, nothing. His grief had built walls so high that even his own father couldn't reach him. Until one night, a room service delivery went terribly wrong.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there, sir. I'll clean this up right away.
She crashed into his darkness, spilling food everywhere, breaking his silence with her apologies. But when their eyes met in that luxury suite, something shifted. For the first time since tragedy destroyed his world, he didn't flinch from human contact.
Sit, please, just for a moment. I'd like someone to sit with me.
A waitress working 2 jobs to survive? A reclusive CEO worth billions trapped in his own isolation. She was everything his world told him to avoid. But night after night, she returned to room 917, and slowly, he began to feel human again.
You're not broken, Elias. You're healing. There's a difference.
When I'm with you, I feel like maybe I'm not broken beyond repair after all.
But when his powerful father discovers their midnight meetings, he'll do anything to tear them apart. Will love be enough to bridge 2 impossible worlds? Or will the weight of billions destroy the one connection that brought him back to life? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The alarm clock buzzed loudly next to Naomi Ellis's bed. She groaned and slapped the snooze button. It was 6:00 p.m., and her night shift at the Grand Lakeside Hotel was about to begin in 2 hours. Most people were heading home from work right now, but for Naomi, her day was just beginning. At 26, Naomi was juggling more responsibilities than most people her age. She worked the overnight shift at the luxury hotel in downtown Chicago, took morning classes at the community college, and spent her afternoons working at a small cafe near campus. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, not if she wanted to escape the cycle of serving others for the rest of her life. "Not tonight," she muttered, looking at the pouring rain outside her apartment window. The weather forecast had promised clear skies, but Chicago weather rarely kept its promises. She grabbed her umbrella and packed her school notes in a waterproof bag. She had an exam tomorrow, and she planned to study during her breaks. Her small apartment was nothing fancy, just a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom that was barely big enough to turn around in. But it was hers, and the walls were covered with food magazine cutouts and recipe notes. Naomi's secret dream was to become a food writer someday, not just cook food or serve it to others. She looked at the framed photo of her mother on the dresser, a woman who had spent her entire life serving tables, her dreams buried under other people's orders. "Not me, Mama," Naomi whispered. "I'm going to make it." The bus was late because of the rain, and by the time Naomi arrived at the Grand Lakeside Hotel, she was already cutting it close. She rushed through the employee entrance, greeting the security guard with a quick wave. "You're cutting it close, Ellis," said Marcus, the night manager, checking his watch as Naomi hurried to the staff room. "Sorry, Marcus. The bus was late because of the storm," she explained, quickly tying her apron and fixing her hair. "Well, hurry up. We've got that tech conference going on tonight. The place is packed with VIPs. Naomi nodded, already feeling the weight of what would clearly be a demanding shift. The Grand Lakeside was Chicago's premier luxury hotel, catering to the wealthy and powerful. The tips could be good on nights like these, but the guests could also be incredibly demanding. The night moved at a frantic pace. The hotel ballroom was hosting some kind of tech industry event, and the lobby bar was filled with men in expensive suits, talking about investments and stock options. Naomi moved efficiently between tables, keeping her smile fixed in place, even when guests barely acknowledged her presence. "Another scotch, neat," said a man without looking up from his phone, snapping his fingers to get her attention. "Right away, sir," Naomi replied, biting back what she really wanted to say. Her mother had taught her that dignity wasn't about how others treated you, but how you carried yourself regardless. By midnight, the crowds had thinned considerably. Naomi was taking a quick break in the staff room, reviewing her notes for tomorrow's exam, when Marcus appeared at the door. "Ellis, I need you to take a room service order up to the 9th floor. Naomi checked the clock. "At this hour?" "It's room 917. Just some sandwiches and tea. The guest specifically requested that they be delivered now." Naomi sighed and tucked her notes back into her bag. "Fine, I'll take care of it." The kitchen prepared the order, a simple selection of club sandwiches, a pot of chamomile tea and some fresh fruit. Naomi arranged everything on the silver tray and headed for the service elevator. The 9th floor of the hotel was reserved for the most exclusive suites. Naomi had only been up there a few times during her 6 months working at the Grand Lakeside. As the elevator doors opened, she noticed how quiet it was compared to the bustling lobby downstairs. The thick carpet muffled her footsteps as she made her way down the dimly lit hallway. Room 917 was at the end of the corridor. Naomi balanced the heavy tray with one hand while scrolling through her PH1 notes with the other, trying to make the most of every spare minute for studying. A sudden jerk of the tray nearly made her drop everything. She steadied herself and knocked on the door of room 917. There was no answer. She knocked again, a bit louder this time. "Room service," she called out. She thought she heard a faint sound from inside. Following hotel protocol, she used her master key to open the door slightly. "Room service," she repeated, pushing the door open wider. The suite was dark except for a single lamp in the corner. Naomi took a step inside, struggling to balance the tray while reaching for the light switch. That's when it happened. A figure emerged suddenly from the shadows of the room, and Naomi, startled and already off balance, crashed right into him. The tray tilted, sending sandwiches, tea, and fruit flying across the expensive carpet. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Naomi exclaimed, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered food. "I didn't see you there, sir. I'll clean this up right away and get you a fresh order." But the man didn't move or speak. He just stood there staring at her with an intensity that made Naomi freeze. He was tall, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard that couldn't hide his handsome features. His eyes, though, they looked haunted, as if they had seen too much pain. Naomi suddenly felt self-conscious under his gaze. "Sir, are you okay? I said I'll replace everything." The silence stretched between them. Then, to her surprise, the man spoke in a voice that sounded rusty from disuse. "Sit, please. Just for a moment." Naomi blinked in confusion. "Excuse me?" "Please," he repeated, gesturing to one of the armchairs in the suite's living area. "Just for a moment." Every instinct told Naomi to politely decline, clean up the mess, and get out. This wasn't normal hotel guest behavior, but something in the man's eyes, a profound loneliness, made her pause. "I really should clean this up," she said, but her resolve was weakening. "Leave it," he said. "Please, I'd like someone to sit with me, just for a few minutes." Against her better judgment, Naomi found herself taking a seat in one of the plush armchairs. The man sat opposite her, still watching her with that strange, intense gaze. "I'm Naomi," she offered, if only to break the uncomfortable silence. "Naomi Ellis." "Elias Crane," he replied simply. The name struck a chord of recognition. Elias Crane, the reclusive tech genius whose company, Crane Technologies, was worth billions. The man was practically a ghost in the business world, famous for never giving interviews or attending public events. "You're Elias Crane? The Elias Crane?" Naomi couldn't help asking. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed his face. "Does that matter?" "No, I guess not," Naomi replied honestly. I've heard the name." Elias seemed to relax slightly at her response. "Most people have a lot more to say when they realize who I am." "Well, I'm not most people," Naomi said with a small smile. "And honestly, right now, you're just the guest whose dinner I ruined." To her surprise, the corner of Elias's mouth twitched upward, almost forming a smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger, more human. "I wasn't hungry anyway," he said. "I just wanted someone to bring something, someone to—" "To break the silence?" Naomi suggested. Elias looked at her with surprise, as if she had read his mind. "Yes, exactly that." Naomi glanced at her watch. She had already been there longer than she should have been. "I really should get back to work, Mr. Crane. Marcus, my manager, will be wondering where I am." "Call him, Elias said suddenly. "Tell him I requested your assistance for a while longer. I'll make sure you're compensated for your time." Naomi hesitated. This was strange, but not exactly threatening. Elias Crane didn't seem dangerous, just incredibly sad and lonely. Okay, she agreed, sending a quick text to Marcus explaining that the guest in 917 needed additional service. Marcus's reply came almost instantly. Whatever Mr. Crane wants, take your time. The power of money and status, Naomi thought wryly. So, she said, settling back into the chair, what would you like to talk about, Mr. Crane? Elias, he corrected her. And I don't want to talk about anything in particular. I haven't had a normal conversation with someone in a very long time. Define normal, Naomi said. A conversation that doesn't involve business proposals, stock prices, or technological innovations, he replied. A conversation with someone who isn't trying to get something from me. Naomi couldn't help but laugh. Well, I'm definitely not here to pitch you a startup idea. I barely understand how my own phone works half the time. That almost smile appeared on his face again. What do you do, Naomi Ellis, when you're not delivering room service to antisocial billionaires? I study, she replied. I'm taking classes at the community college, and I work at a cafe near campus in the afternoons. And I write when I can find the time. You write? His interest seemed genuine. Food reviews, recipes, that kind of thing. Nothing published yet, just a blog that about 3 people read. But someday... She trailed off, suddenly embarrassed by her dreams in the face of his success. Someday what? He prompted. Someday I'd like to be a food writer for a major publication, she admitted. Travel the world, eat interesting things, tell stories about the people behind the food. Elias nodded slowly. That sounds like a worthy ambition. What about you? Naomi asked. What do you do besides, well, being a billionaire? Is that a full-time job? She worried for a moment that she'd overstepped, but Elias actually chuckled, a rough, unpracticed sound. It is, unfortunately, he said, though not in the way most people imagine. I spend most of my time in meetings I don't want to attend and avoiding events I'm expected to appear at. Like the tech conference downstairs? Naomi guessed. Elias nodded. Exactly like that. My team is there representing Crane Technologies. Everyone expects me to make an appearance, but you'd rather be alone? Naomi finished for him. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding. Not alone, he said quietly. Just not there. There's a difference. Naomi found herself nodding. Jashi understood the distinction more than he might have realized. Sometimes being in a crowd was the loneliest place of all. They talked for nearly an hour. Naomi told him about growing up watching her mother wait tables at the same diner for 20 years, about her determination to get an education and build a different life. Elias didn't share much about himself, but he listened to her with a focus that made her feel like every word she said mattered. When Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus asking for her help with another guest, she realized how long she'd been there. I really have to go now, she said, standing up. But it was nice talking with you, Elias. Elias stood as well, and for a moment he looked almost panicked at the thought of her leaving. Will you be working tomorrow night? He asked. Yes, same shift, Naomi replied. Would it be inappropriate if I requested room service, Agayen? Around this time? Naomi should have found the request strange, but somehow she didn't. Not inappropriate. Just make sure you actually want the food this time, because I can't promise I'll spill it all again. That got her another almost smile. I'll be more specific with my order tomorrow. As Naomi turned to leave, she remembered the mess on the floor. I should clean that up before I go. Leave it, Elias said. Please. It's nice to see every day and see that someone else was here. The statement was so honest, so vulnerable, that Naomi didn't quite know how to respond. She simply nodded and headed for the door. Good night, Elias, she said softly. Good night, Naomi Ellis, he replied, her full name sounding like something precious when he said it. As Naomi made her way back to the service elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. She had crashed into the most reclusive billionaire in Chicago, spilled his dinner all over his expensive suite, and somehow ended up having the most genuine conversation she'd had in months. The next night, Naomi found herself oddly nervous as her shift began. She told herself it was because of the exam she'd taken that morning, not because she was wondering if Elias Crane would really request room service again. Just after midnight, Marcus approached her with a knowing smile. "Room 917 is asking for you specifically," he said. "Apparently you made quite an impression last night." Naomi felt her cheeks warm. "It's just room service, Marcus." "Room service that comes with a $100 tip just for you," Marcus replied, raising his eyebrows. "Whatever you did, Ellis, keep doing it. Mr. Crane hasn't interacted with hotel staff in the 3 years he's been staying here during his Chicago visits. Usually his assistant handles everything." This information made Naomi even more curious about Elias. As she made her way to the 9th floor with a fresh tray, this time with a selection of desserts and coffee, she wondered what had made him reach out now, and why to her, of all people. When she knocked on the door of room 917, there was a different energy than the night before. This time she heard footsteps approaching, and the door opened to reveal Elias, dressed casually in a simple black sweater and jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You came," he said, as if he had been half expecting her to send someone else. "You ordered dessert," Naomi replied with a small smile. "I'm not one to turn down chocolate cake, even if it's for someone else." That earned her another of those almost smiles as he stepped aside to let her in. The suite had been cleaned since the previous night, but Elias had clearly requested that the furniture remain exactly as it had been during their conversation: 2 armchairs facing each other, a small table between them. "You can put the tray down there," he said, indicating the table. "And if you have time—" "I have my break now," Naomi said, answering his unspoken question. "I can stay for a little while." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you." As Naomi set down the tray, she noticed that there were 2 cups on it, not one. She looked up at Elias questioningly. "I thought perhaps you might join me," he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Unless that's against hotel policy." "What Marcus doesn't know won't hurt him," Naomi replied, taking a seat. "Besides, you're the guest. If you want to share your dessert with the help, that's your business." "You're not the help at Naomi," Elias said with unexpected sharpness. "Don't diminish yourself that way." Naomi was taken aback by his tone. "It was just a joke." Elias's expression softened. "I'm sorry, I've seen how people in your position are often treated as invisible. It bothers me." "Says the man who's famous for never being seen," Naomi pointed out, unable to resist the irony. To her surprise, Elias actually laughed, a real laugh this time, not just a chuckle. The sound transformed his face completely, erasing years of sorrow for just a moment. "Touché," he said, his eyes bright with amusement. "I suppose we both know something about invisibility, don't we?" As they shared the chocolate cake and coffee, Naomi found herself telling Elias more about her life, her struggles to pay for school, her blog that only her best friend and her mother read regularly, her collection of food magazines dating back to when she was 16. "May I read your blog?" Elias asked suddenly. Naomi nearly choked on her coffee. "What? Why would you want to do that?" "Because you talk about food with passion," he replied simply. "I'd like to see that passion in your writing." "It's nothing special," Naomi protested, suddenly self-conscious. "Just amateur reviews and recipes." "Everyone starts somewhere," Elias said. "Before Crane Technologies was worth billions, it was just me in a garage with too much caffeine and not enough sleep." Naomi hesitated, then took out her phone and pulled up her blog. She handed the p-hone to Elias, watching nervously as he scrolled through her latest posts. His face was unreadable as he read, and Naomi found herself holding her breath. Finally, he looked up, his expression serious. "You have talent," he said. "Real talent. Your descriptions make me taste the food without having eaten it. Why aren't you pursuing this more aggressively?" Naomi sighed. "Because talent doesn't pay the bills, Elias. Reality means working 2 jobs and taking classes when I can afford them. Not everyone can just follow their dreams." Elias handed the phone back to her, his fingers brushing hers briefly. It was the first time they had touched, and Naomi felt a strange jolt at the contact. "I understand reality better than you might think," he said quietly. Something in his tone made Naomi curious. Can I ask you something personal? Elias tensed visibly, but nodded. Marcus said you've been staying at this hotel for 3 years during your Chicago visits, but you never interact with the staff. Why me? Why now? Elias was quiet for so long that Naomi thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because you crashed into me, and I didn't flinch. What does that mean? Naomi asked, confused. Elias's eyes met hers, and the pain she saw there took her breath away. It means that for the first time in 9 years, someone touched me, even accidentally, and I didn't recoil. I didn't feel broken. The vulnerability in his admission hung in the air between them. Naomi didn't know what had happened 9 years ago, but she could see that whatever it was had shattered something essential in this man. I should go, Naomi said softly, sensing that they had reached a boundary Elias wasn't ready to cross yet. Thank you for the cake and coffee. Elias nodded, his composure returning. Would it be all right if I requested room service again tomorrow night? Naomi smiled. I think that could be arranged, but next time I get to pick the dessert. As she left room 917 that night, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much bigger than she understood. Elias Crane was a mystery, a broken, brilliant man who had chosen her, of all people, to break his silence. What she didn't know was that across the city, in a modest apartment much like her own, another person was very interested in Elias Crane's activities. Jessica Winters, Elias's executive assistant, hung up the phone after receiving a report from the hotel security she had hired to monitor her boss. So, as he murmured to herself, after all this time, he's finally talking to someone, a waitress of all people. She tapped her perfectly manicured nails against her desk. Rebecca would be so pleased. Jessica picked up a framed photo, a beautiful blonde woman with a radiant smile, standing next to a younger, happier Elias Crane. Your plan might actually be working, Becca, Jessica said to the photograph. Now, we just have to make sure this Naomi Ellis is worthwhile of him. She opened her laptop and began typing, initiating a background check on the young woman who had somehow managed to do what no one else had in 9 years. Break through Elias Crane's walls over the next 2 weeks. Naomi's midnight visits to room 917 became a routine she looked forward to more than she cared to admit. Every night around midnight, Marcus would give her that knowing smile and tell her that Mr. Crane had requested room service, always with Naomi specified as the server. Their conversations flowed more easily with each visit. Elias ordered different desserts each night, always with 2 plates, 2 cups. Sometimes they talked about Naomi's classes or her blog. Other times, they discussed books or movies or the view of Chicago from the suite's large windows. But Elias never talked about himself, never mentioned his past, never explained his cryptic comment about not flinching when she chid him. Whenever Naomi tried to steer the conversation toward his life, he would skillfully redirect it back to her. After their 5th meeting, Marcus cornered Naomi in the staff room. Whatever you're doing with Mr. Crane, keep it up, he said, his voice low. The hotel manager got a call from Crane's office. They've extended his stay for another month. Do you have any idea how much that suite costs per night? Naomi shook her head. $5,000 ours, Marcus said, eyes wide. And word is he's never stayed this long before. Usually he's in and out of Chicago in 3 days flat. The information made Naomi uneasy. Was Elias staying because of her? The thought seemed ridiculous. She was just a waitress, and he was one of the richest men in America. But the timing was hard to ignore. That night, as they shared a piece of New York cheesecake, Naomi decided to push a little harder. Can I ask you something, Elias? She said, setting down her fork. He looked wary but nodded. Why are you still in Chicago? Marcus says you usually only stay for a few days. Elias was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup as if it held the answers to questions he wasn't ready to ask. Would you believe me if I said it was because of the cheesecake? He finally replied with one of his almost smiles. No, Naomi said simply. I wouldn't. Elias sighed. The truth is complicated, Naomi. I'm a college student working 2 jobs to make ends meet. I understand complicated. Fair point, he conceded. The truth is, these conversations with you, They're the first real human interaction I've had in years, not business meetings or forced social events, but actual conversations where I feel present. That's sad, Naomi said, before she could stop herself. To her surprise, Elias laughed. Yes, I suppose it is. Pathetic even. A billionaire so socially stunted he has to pay for room service just to have someone to talk to. That's not what I meant, Naomi protested. It's just, someone like you could have friends, relationships, anything you want. Money doesn't fix everything, Naomi, Elias said, his voice suddenly tight. Some things, once broken, stay that way. The pain in his voice was so raw that Naomi decided not to push further. Instead, she steered the conversation back to safer ground, telling him about a disastrous cooking experiment she'd attempted for her blog. By the time she left room 917 that night, the tension had eased, but Naomi couldn't stop thinking about the brokenness she'd glimpsed in Elias. What or who had damaged him so deeply? The next morning, exhausted after her shift, Naomi dragged herself to her small apartment. She had just collapsed onto her bed when her phone rang. It was her moth-er. "Mama, it's early," Naomi groaned. "I just got off work." "I know, baby, but I had to call." Her mother's voice was strained. "The landlord raised the rent again. I don't think I can make it this month." Naomi sat up, suddenly wide awake. Her mother, Loretta Ellis, had been a waitress at the same diner in Detroit for over 25 years. At 58, with arthritis making her hands stiff and painful, she was barely hanging on. "How much do you need?" Naomi asked, already mentally calculating what she could spare from her next paycheck. $300, Loretta replied. "I hate to ask, baby, but—" "It's okay, Mama. I'll send it today," Naomi promised, even though she knew it would mean skipping a few meals herself this week. After ending the call, Naomi sat on her bed, staring at her bank account balance on her phone. The money she'd been saving for next semester's textbooks would now go to her mother's rent. It was always something. A medical bill, a car repair, an unexpected expense that kept both of them trapped in the same cycle of barely getting by. With a sigh, Naomi transferred the money to her mother and then fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of silver trays and haunted eyes. Across town, in a sleek downtown office building, Jessica Winters sat across from a private investigator, reviewing the file he'd compiled on Naomi Ellis. 26 years old, working 2 jobs while attending community college part-time, the investigator said. Mother is a waitress in Detroit, father unknown, no criminal record, good credit despite her limited income. She writes a food blog that gets minimal traffic. Nothing particularly remarkable about her, except she seems to work harder than most people. Jessica nodded, studying the photo of Naomi attached to the file. The young woman was pretty in an understated way, warm brown skin, curly hair often pulled back in a practical bun, intelligent eyes. Not a conventional beauty like Rebecca had been, but there was a quiet strength in her face that Jessica could appreciate. "What about her interactions with Mr. Crane?" Jessica asked. "Limited to the hotel suite, as far as we can tell. She delivers room service every night around midnight and stays for approximately 1 hour. They just talk." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Just talk, nothing else?" The investigator shook his head. "Nothing else. He doesn't even touch her. They sit on opposite sides of the room." Jessica leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. This was promising. Elias wasn't the type to be impressed by beauty alone, or to fall for obvious advances. Rebecca had always said that what Elias valued most was authenticity, something rare in his world of wealth and power. "Keep watching them," Jessica instructed, "and get me more information about her financial situation. I want to know exactly how much she struggles." That night at the hotel, Naomi was distracted during her shift. The money she'd sent to her mother meant she wouldn't be able to afford the textbook for her business writing class, a class she needed to improve her food writing skills. It was just one more setback in a long line of them. When midnight came and Marcus told her that room 917 had requested her again, Naomi almost considered asking someone else to go. She wasn't in the mood for conversation tonight, especially with someone whose biggest worry was probably which million-dollar company to buy next. But she needed the tips too badly to refuse. So she put on her professional smile and headed up to the 9th floor with a tray of chocolate mousse and espresso. Elias opened the door before she could knock, as if he'd been waiting for her. One look at H, his face told Naomi that something was different tonight. There was an intensity in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "Please." Naomi entered the suite and set down the tray, noticing that the usual 2 armchairs had been replaced by a comfortable-looking sofa. "I thought a change of scenery might be nice," Elias explained, gesturing to the sofa, "if that's okay with you." "It's your suite," Naomi replied with a shrug, tacking a seat at one end of the sofa. Elias sat at the other end, maintaining the distance between them that had characterized all their interactions. "You seem troubled tonight," Elias observed as he poured the espresso. Naomi considered brushing off his comment with a polite denial, but something about the genuine concern in his voice made her decide to be honest. "Just money problems," she said. "Nothing you'd understand." As soon as the words left her mouth, she regretted them. "I'm sorry. That was rude." "It was honest," Elias corrected her. "And you're right. I don't understand financial struggles, at least not anymore. But I'd like to understand yours if you're willing to tell me." So Naomi told him about her mother's call, about the money she'd sent, about the textbook she now couldn't afford. As she spoke, she realized it wasn't just about the money. It was about the constant uphill battle the fear had. No matter how hard she worked, she'd never break free of the cycle her mother had been trapped in. "I'm just so tired," she admitted. "Sometimes it feels like I'm running as fast as I can just to stay in the same place." Elias listened without interrupting, his face serious. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Let me help you," he finally said. Naomi stiffened. "I don't want your charity, Elias." "It's not charity," he insisted. "It's an investment in your future. I've read your blog, Naomi. You have real talent. With the right resources, you could be exceptional." "I can't take your money," Naomi said firmly. "These conversations we have, they're real because there's nothing else behind them. No expectations, no power imbalance. If you start paying my bills, that changes everything." Elias looked frustrated, but nodded. "I understand. But will you at least let me do one thing? A small thing?" Naomi regarded him suspiciously. "What kind of small thing?" "Let me send a link to your blog to some people I know in the publishing industry," he said. "No mention of our connection, no special favors, just a link and a recommendation to read it." Naomi hesitated. It wasn't money, but it was still help, the kind of help that wasn't available to most struggling writers. "Would you really not mention that you know me?" she asked. "I promise," Elias said solemnly. "Just a link and a comment that I found it interesting, nothing more." Naomi thought about it and then slowly nodded. "Okay, that seems fair." Relief washed over Elias's face. "Thank you for allowing me that much." They ate their chocolate mousse in silence for a few minutes, both lost in thought. Then Elias set down his spoon and took a deep breath. "I think it's time I told you why I am the way I am," he said, his voice low and saint-rained. Naomi's heart began to beat faster. She had been curious about Elias's past since their first meeting, but she'd never expected him to volunteer the information. "You don't have to," she said, though she desperately wanted to know. "I do," he insisted. "You've shared your struggles with me. It's only fair that I share mine with you." Elias stood and walked to a briefcase that sat on the desk in the corner of the room. He removed a small framed photograph and brought it back to the sofa, sitting closer to Naomi than he had before. "This is Rebecca," he said, handing her the photo. The woman in the picture was stunning. Blonde hair, bright blue eyes, a smile that lit up her entire face. She was standing on a beach laughing at something off camera. "She was beautiful," Naomi said softly. "She was everything," Elias replied, his voice breaking slightly. "My fiancé, my best friend, my partner in every sense of the word." The past tense told Naomi what she needed to know, but she waited for Elias to continue. 9 years ago, we were driving back from a weekend getaway," he said, his eyes fixed on the photograph in Naomi's hands. "It was raining, like the night you and I met. A truck lost control on the highway and crossed the median. It hit us head on." Naomi felt her throat tighten. Elias, I'm so sorry. I survived. Rebecca didn't, he continued, his voice now mechanical, as if he'd detached himself from the words to be able to say them. The doctor said it was instantaneous. She didn't suffer, as if that was supposed to make it better somehow. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. It doesn't make it better, nothing does. No, Elias agreed, nothing does. After the accident, I couldn't bear to be touched. Every physical contact reminded me of what I'd lost. Rebecca's hand in mine, her head on my shoulder, the feel of her in my arms. So I just stopped. No handshakes, no friendly pats on the back. Nothing. I built my company from behind closed doors, through video conferences and emails. The few people I allowed in my life, my assistant Jessica, my business partners, learned not to touch me. Until I crashed into you, Naomi said, understanding dawning. Elias nodded, finally looking up to meet her eyes. Until you crashed into me, and for the first time in 9 years, I didn't feel pain at human contact. I felt something else, something I thought had died with Rebecca. The air between them seemed charged with emotion. Naomi wasn't sure what to say, how to respond to this raw confession. Thank you for telling me, she finally managed. I know it wasn't easy. Elias took the photo back, his fingers carefully avoiding contact with hers. I've never told anyone else the full story, not even Jessica, who was Rebecca's best friend before she became my assistant. Why me? Naomi asked, echoing the question she'd asked during their first real conversation. Elias's answer was simple and devastating in its honesty. Because when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I'm not broken beyond repair after all. The weight of his words hung between them. Naomi felt both honored and terrified by the responsibility they placed on her. She was just a waitress with dreams of being a writer. How could she possibly help heal a wound as deep as Elias's? I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything, Elias assured her. Just don't stop coming here, don't stop talking to me. I won't, Naomi promised, and she meant it. The next morning, as Naomi trudged up the stairs to her apartment after her shift, she was surprised to find a package leaning against her door. There was no return address, just her name printed on a simple white label. Inside the package was the textbook she needed for her business writing class, along with a note that read, "This isn't charity, it's a friend helping a friend. Please accept it in the spirit it's given." Naomi's first instinct was to be angry. She had specifically told Elias she didn't want his help, but as she flipped through the expensive textbook, she couldn't help but feel touched by the gesture. He had respected her boundaries by not giving her money directly, but had found a way to help that maintained her dignity. She sent him a simple text message. "Thank you, friend." His reply came almost instantly. "You're welcome, friend." That simple exchange marked a shift in their relationship. They were no longer just a waitress and a guest who shared midnight conversations. They were friends, an unlikely pair connected by genuine understanding and growing affection. Meanwhile, Jessica Winters sat in her office, reviewing the latest report from her investigator. The textbook delivery had been observed and documented. It was a small gesture, but significant. Elias hadn't given anyone a gift in 9 years, not since the diamond engagement ring he'd placed on Rebecca's finger. Jessica opened her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten by Rebecca a week before the accident. It was addressed to Jessica with instructions to open it only if something happened to her. Jessica had read the letter so many times over the years that she knew it by heart, but she read it again now, her eyes lingering on the final paragraph. "If I'm gone, Jess, promise me you'll look after him. Not just his schedule or his business, but his heart. Elias loves too deeply to be alone forever. When the right person comes along, someone real, someone kind, someone who sees him and not his money, help them find their way to each other. He deserves to be happy again, even if I'm not there to see it." Jessica folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "I'm trying, Becca," she whispered. "I think I might have found her." But helping Elias find happiness again wasn't as simple as Jessica had hoped. The next morning, she received a call from Thomas Crane, Elias's father, and the chairman of the board at Crane Technologies. Jessica, What is this I hear about Elias extending his stay in Chicago? Thomas demanded, his voice sharp with disapproval. We have the Singapore deal closing next week. He needs to be back in New York for the final negotiations. Mr. Crane is taking some personal time, Jessica replied carefully. I believe it's beneficial for him. Personal time, Thomas scoffed. Elias doesn't take personal time, he works. That's what Cranes do. Whatever's keeping him in Chicago, put an end to it. The company needs him focused. With all due respect, sir, I believe what Mr. Crane needs right now is exactly what he's doing in Chicago, Jessica countered, thinking of the small signs of life she'd observed in her boss recently. The occasional almost smile, the reduced tension in his shoulders. What he needs is irrelevant, Thomas said coldly. What the company needs is what matters. Get him back to New York by Monday, Jessica. That's an order. Before Jessica could respond, Thomas hung up. She sat back in her chair, troubled. For 9 years, she had balanced her loyalty to Elias with her promise to Rebecca and the demands of the Crane family. Now those competing obligations were coming into direct conflict. She picked up her phone and dialed the investigator again. I need you to find out everything you can about Naomi Ellis's schedule for the next few days. And I mean everything. Her work hours, her classes, where she eats lunch, all of it. If Jessica was going to fulfill her promise to Rebecca, she needed to move quickly. She had 4 days to determine if Naomi Ellis was truly the person who could bring Elias back to life, before Thomas Crane's deadline forced her hand. That night at the hotel, Naomi arrived for her shift to find the lobby unusually busy. A woman in an elegant suit was speaking with Marcus at the front desk, her perfect posture and commanding presence drawing everyone's attention. As Naomi approached the staff room, Marcus caught her eye and beckoned her over. Ellis, this is Ms. Winters from Mr. Crane's office. She'd like to speak with you. Naomi felt a flutter of anxiety as she faced the elegant woman. This had to be the Jessica that Elias had mentioned, Rebecca's best friend and his assistant. Ms. Ellis, Jessica said, her voice cool but not unfriendly. I was hoping we might have a word in private. I'm due to start my shift, Naomi Rep lied cautiously. I've already cleared it with your manager, Jessica said smoothly. This won't take long. Marcus nodded confirmation, and Naomi found herself following Jessica to a quiet corner of the hotel bar. They sat at a small table, Jessica ordering sparkling water for both of them with the casual authority of someone used to giving orders. I'll be direct, Ms. Ellis, Jessica said once they were alone. I know about your late-night conversations with Elias. Naomi felt her defenses rise. We haven't done anything wrong. I never suggested you had, Jessica replied. In fact, I'm here because I believe your influence on Elias has been positive. This was not what Naomi had expected. I don't understand. Jessica studied her for a moment before speaking again. Elias told you about Rebecca, didn't he? Naomi nodded, unsure how much she should reveal. What he probably didn't tell you is that Rebecca was my best friend since childhood, Jessica continued. After she died, I promised myself I would look after Elias, not just as his assistant, but as someone who cared about his well-being. That's very loyal of you, Naomi said cautiously. It wasn't just loyalty, Jessica corrected her. It was love. Not romantic love, but the kind of love that comes from shared grief. Rebecca loved Elias with her whole heart, and she would have hated to see what he became after she died. Naomi wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but she remained silent, letting Jessica continue. For 9 years I've watched him exist rather than live, Jessica said, her professional facade cracking slightly to reveal genuine emotion. Until 2 weeks ago, when he met you. Suddenly he's staying longer in Chicago. He sent someone a link to a food blog. He bought a textbook as a gift. Small things perhaps, but for Elias they're monumental. I don't think I've done anything special, Naomi said honestly. We just talk. Sometimes talking is exactly what's needed, Jessica replied. But I need to know something, Miss Ellis. What are your intentions toward Elias? The question caught Naomi off guard. My intentions? We're friends. That's all. Is it? Jessica pressed. Because if you're hoping for more, if you see Elias as a ticket to a better life, a wealthy benefactor, or a romantic prospect? I need to know now. Naomi felt a flash of anger. I'm not interested in Elias's money, Ms. Winters, and I'm certainly not trying to take advantage of him. If that's what you're implying, this conversation is over. She started to rise from her seat, but Jessica's next words stopped her. He's being called back to New York, Jessica said quickly. His father is insisting. If he leaves Chicago now, I'm afraid he'll retreat back into his isolation, unless... Unless what? Naomi asked, slowly sitting back down. Unless he has a reason to stay connected, Jessica finished. A friend who won't let him disappear again. Naomi studied Jessica's face, trying to understand her motives. Why are you telling me this? Because I made a promise to Rebecca, Jessica said simply, and because I've seen how Elias looks when he talks about you. It's the same way he used to look when he talked about her. Alive, present, engaged with the world. I don't know what you expect me to do, Naomi said. I can't make him stay in Chicago. No, but you can give him something he hasn't had in 9 years, a connection worth maintaining even from a distance. Naomi felt the weight of Jessica's words. She had only known Elias for 2 weeks, yet somehow she had become important to his healing process. The responsibility was overwhelming. I should get to work, Naomi said, standing up again. Thank you for the information. Jessica nodded, reaching into her purse and pulling out a business card. If you ever need to reach me, or if Elias ever needs you and you can't reach him directly, call this number, day or night. Naomi took the card, tucking it into her apron pocket. As she turned to leave, Jessica called after her. Ms. Ellis, for what it's worth, I think Rebecca would have liked you very much. The commentee stayed with Naomi throughout her shift, echoing in her mind as she served drinks and took orders. By the time midnight approached, and Marcus told her that room 9 had requested her, she was a bundle of conflicting emotions. When Elias opened the door to his suite, Naomi could tell immediately that something was wrong. His face was tense, his posture rigid, reminiscent of how he had looked the first night they met. What happened? She asked as she set do and the tray of desserts. My father called, Elias replied, his voice flat. I'm needed back in New York by Monday for a business deal. I see, Naomi said, her conversation with Jessica suddenly making more sense. And you don't want to go? Elias ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had never seen from him before. It's not about what I want. It never is, with my father. I met Jessica today, Naomi said, deciding honesty was the best approach. She told me you might be leaving. Elias looked surprised, then resigned. Jessica is thorough. What else did she tell you? That you've been different since we met. That she's worried you'll retreat again if you go back to New York. Elias sighed, sitting down heavily on the sofa. Jessica worries too much. Does she? Naomi challenged, taking a seat beside him, closer than she normally would have. Will you retreat, Elias? Will you go back to being the recluse who doesn't let anyone in? I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely audible. These past 2 weeks have been... I don't have the words for what they've been. But New York is different. My father is there, the board, the weight of the company. It's easier to be numb there. Easier isn't always better, Naomi said gently. No, Elias agreed. It's not. They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of their situation settling between them. Elias would leave Chicago. Their midnight conversations would end. Whatever connection they had formed might disappear as quickly as it had appeared. I don't want to go back to how I was before, Elias finally said, the admission clearly difficult for him. But I don't know how to be anything else in that world. Then don't be, Naomi said simply. Don't go back to how you were. Take this, she gestured between them. Take whatever has channeled in you these past 2 weeks and bring it with you. How? Elias asked, looking at her with those haunted eyes that had captivated her from the beginning. Naomi took a deep breath and reached out, slowly placing her hand on top of his. It was the first time she had deliberately touched him, and she felt him tense momentarily before relaxing under her touch. By remembering that you're not alone anymore, she said softly, even when we're not in the same Aim City. Elias looked down at their hands, then back up at Naomi's face. The vulnerability in his expression made her heart ache. Will you? He started, then stopped, seeming unsure of what he wanted to ask. "Will I what?" Naomi prompted. "Will you stay in touch? After I leave?" The question was asked with such uncertainty that Naomi almost laughed. "Of course I will," she assured him. "Did you think I wouldn't want to?" "I thought you might be relieved," Elias admitted, "to not have to spend your breaks talking to a broken man." "You're not broken, Elias," Naomi said firmly. "You're healing. There's a difference." For the first time since they'd met, Elias smiled, not an almost smile, not a glimpse of what might have been, but a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Thank you," he said, turning his hand under hers so that their palms met, "for seeing that difference." As they sat there, hands joined, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained was closing, not just physically but emotionally. They were no longer just a waitress and a guest or even just friends. They were two people standing at the edge of something deeper, something both terrifying and exhilarating. What neither of them knew was that across town, Thomas Crane was boarding his private jet to Chicago, determined to bring his son back to New York personally and to eliminate whatever distraction was keeping him from his responsibilities. The quiet connection forming in room 917 was about to face its first real test. Thomas Crane was not a man accustomed to being ignored, especially by his own son. At 68, he had built Crane Technologies from a small startup into a global empire through sheer force of will and an uncompromising approach to business. He expected the same dedication from everyone around him, particularly his only child. As his private car pulled up to the Grand Lakeside Hotel, Thomas straightened his already perfect tie and prepared for battle. The fact that Elias had extended his stay in Chicago for a full month was unprecedented and troubling. Whatever had captured his son's attention needed to be addressed and eliminated. The Singapore deal was too important to the company's future. "Wait here," he instructed his driver as the doorman opened the car door. "This won't take long." The hotel manager practically tripped over himself greeting Thomas Crane. The Crane name opened doors everywhere, and Thomas was used to the deference. He cut through the pleasantries quickly. "My son's room number?" he demanded. "Suite 917, Mr. Crane," the manager replied. "Shall I call up to announce you?" "That won't be necessary," Thomas said, already striding toward the elevators. Meanwhile, in room 917, Naomi and Elias were still sitting close together on the sofa, their hands joined. Neither had spoken for several minutes, both savoring the simple connection that had taken 2 weeks to establish. Finally, Elias broke the silence. "When I go back to New York, would you consider—" A sharp knock at the door interrupted him. Elias frowned, checking his watch. It was nearly 1 a.m. "Are you expecting someone?" Naomi asked, withdrawing her hand from his. "No," Elias replied, standing reluctantly. "It's probably hotel staff with a message from Jessica." When he opened the door, however, it wasn't hotel staff standing there. It was Thomas Crane, immaculate in a tailored suit despite the late hour, his silver hair perfectly combed, his cold blue eyes, so like Elias's in color but utterly different in expression, taking in the scene with obvious disapproval. "Father," Elias said, his voice instantly changing from the warm tone he used with Naomi to something flat and formal. "This is unexpected." "Clearly," Thomas replied, his gaze moving past Elias to Naomi, who had stood up when she realized they had a visitor. "I see I'm interrupting." "This is Naomi Ellis," Elias said, his body language tense. "Naomi, this is my father, Thomas Crane." Naomi nodded politely, suddenly very aware of her waitress uniform and the room service tray on the table. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Crane." Thomas barely acknowledged her greeting. "Ms. Ellis, I need to speak with my son privately. I'm sure you understand." The dismissal was clear. Naomi looked at Elias, who seemed torn between asking her to stay and respecting his father's wishes. "I should get back to work anyway," Naomi said, deciding to make it easier for him. "Good night, Elias, Mr. Crane." As she moved toward the door, Elias stepped slightly in front of her, blocking his father's view as he whispered, "I'll call you tomorrow." Naomi nodded and slipped past Thomas Crane, feeling his cold gaze follow her down the hallway to the service elevator. Back in the suite, father and son faced each other in a silence heavy with tension. "Would you care to explain?" Thomas finally asked, gesturing to the dessert tray with 2 plates, 2 cups. "There's nothing to explain," Elias replied, moving to clear the tray simply to have so, nothing to do with his hands. "Naomi works at the hotel. We've become friends." "Friends," Thomas repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. "Is that why you've extended your stay in Chicago for a month? For a friendship with a waitress?" The contempt in his father's voice made Elias's jaw tighten. "Don't speak about her that way." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly at his son's defensive tone. "I see. So it's more than friendship then?" "It's not your concern either way," Elias said, setting the tray down with more force than necessary. "Why are you here, father?" "You know why," Thomas replied, taking a seat in one of the armchairs without being invited. "The Singapore deal closes on Monday. You need to be in New York for the final negotiations." "Jessica could handle it," Elias countered. "Jessica is not the CEO of Crane Technologies," Thomas said sharply. "You are, and it's time you remembered that. Your responsibilities to the company come before whatever this is." Elias ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I haven't missed a meeting or failed to respond to a single email. The company is fine. The company needs its leader present, not hiding away in Chicago playing house with a hotel employee," Thomas retorted. "I'm not playing house," Elias said, his voice rising slightly. "For the first time in 9 years, I'm actually living instead of just existing. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've never understood anything that couldn't be measured in stock prices or profit margins." Thomas leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Don't talk to me about living, Elias. I've lived a full life, built a company from nothing, provided for our family." "You built a company at the expense of a family," Elias interrupted. "You were too busy living to attend my college graduation or be the when Mom was sick. And when Rebecca died, your only concern was how quickly I would return to work." The mention of Rebecca seemed to catch Thomas off guard. He sat back, some of the anger leaving his face. "That's not fair. I gave you time to grieve." 3 weeks, Elias said bitterly. 3 weeks before you were in my apartment telling me it was time to get back in the saddle. It's as if I'd fallen off a bike, not lost the love of my life." The old paean hung in the air between them. Thomas was the first to look away. Perhaps that was a mistake on my part," he admitted reluctantly. "But I was trying to help in the only way I knew how. Work has always been my salvation in difficult times." "I'm not you, Father," Elias said, his voice softer now. "Work hasn't been my salvation. It's been my hiding place, and I'm tired of hiding." Thomas studied his son's face, noticing for the first time in years a light in his eyes that had been missing since Rebecca's death. He thought of his late wife, Elizabeth, and how she had always accused him of being blind to the emotional needs of their son. Perhaps she had been right. "The girl," Thomas said finally. "This Naomi. Is she important to you?" Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, she is." "How important?" Thomas pressed. "I don't know yet," Elias admitted. "But I want the chance to find out." Thomas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "The Singapore deal still needs to close, Elias. That's not negotiable." "I know," Elias conceded. "I'll be in New York on Monday for the signing." "Good," Thomas said, turning back to face his son. "And after that?" "After that, I'd like to split my time between New York and Chicago," Elias said. "At least for a while." Thomas considered this compromise. It wasn't ideal from a business perspective, but the determination in his son's eyes told him it was the best offer he was going to get. "Very well," he agreed. "We'll try it your way. But I expect you to be fully present when you're in New York. No distractions." "Agreed," Elias said, extending his hand to his father. Thomas looked at the offered hand with surprise. Elias hadn't initiated physical contact with anyone, including his father, since Rebecca's death. Thomas took his son's hand and shook it firmly, feeling a connection that had been missing for too long. "I have a room at the Four Seasons," Thomas said as he moved toward the door. "My flight leaves tomorrow afternoon. Perhaps we could have breakfast in the morning." "I'd like that," Elias replied, and he realized he actually meant it. After his father left, Elias sank onto the sofa, emotionally exhausted but also strangely lighter. He had stood up to his father, something he hadn't done in years. And he had done it for Naomi, for the chance to see where their connection might lead. He picked up his phone and sent her a text. "All clear, father gone. Can we talk tomorrow?" Naomi, hoo-ha, to been unable to focus on her work since leaving room 9117, felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She read Elias's message with relief. "Off at 8 a.m., breakfast at Maggie's Diner on 4th Street at 9? His reply came quickly. "I'll be there." The next morning, Naomi arrived at Maggie's Diner 15 minutes early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still at home. She chose a booth by the window and ordered coffee, checking her appearance in the reflect ion of her phone screen. She had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a simple blue sweater, her curly hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual work bun. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner, and Elias stepped out. He was dressed more casually than she had ever seen him, in dark jeans and a grey sweater that made his blue eyes even more striking. Several heads turned as he entered the diner. Even in casual clothes, there was something about him that commanded attention. When he spotted Naomi, his face transformed with a smile that made her heart skip. He slid into the booth across from her, looking both nervous and happy. "You look different," he said. "Good different." "So do you," Naomi replied. "I've never seen you in anything but suits." "Jessica packed a few casual options," Elias explained. "She said I should try to blend in." Naomi laughed. "I hate to break it to you, but you're never going to blend in at Elias, not even in jeans." He looked around the diner, noticing the curious glances from other patrons. "I suppose not." A waitress approached to take their order, doing a double take when she recognized Naomi. "Elias, since when do you eat here instead of work here?" "Morning, Rita," Naomi greeted her with a smile. "I'm taking a day off from serving to be served." Rita's eyes darted to Elias, clearly curious, but professional enough not to ask questions. "What can I get you to?" After they ordered, pancakes for Naomi, eggs and toast for Elias, a slightly awkward silence fell between them. This was the first time they had met outside of room 917, outside the safe boundaries of their midnight conversations. "So," Naomi finally said, "how was the rest of your night with your father?" Elias stirred his coffee slowly. "Better than expected, actually. We came to an understanding." "About New York?" Naomi asked, trying to keep the apprehension out of her voice. "Yes," Elias replied. "I'll go back on Sunday for the Singapore deal closing on Monday. But after that, I'm going to split my time between New York and Chicago." Naomi tried not to show how much this news affected her. "That sounds like a good compromise." "It is," Elias agreed. "But there's something I wanted to ask you before my father interrupted last night." Naomi's heartbeat quickened. "What is it?" "Would you consider—" Elias paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Would you consider visiting me in New York sometime? I could send the company jet, arrange for accommodations. You could see the city, maybe meet with some food editors I know." The offer took Naomi by surprise. "You want me to visit you in New York?" "Only if you want to," Elias added quickly. "No pressure. I just thought—" "Yes," Naomi said before he could finish. "I'd like that. I've never been to New York." The relief on Elias's face was evident. "Good. That's good." Their breakfast arrived, and as they ate, the initial awkwardness faded. They talked about Naomi's classes, about places in Chicago that Elias had never visited, despite his frequent business trips to the city, about books they both enjoyed. It was like their midnight conversations, but in daylight in the real world. After breakfast, Elias hesitated outside the diner. "I have to meet my father for lunch before his flight, but I'd like to see you again before I leave for New York. Are you free tonight?" "I work until midnight," Naomi replied. "But after that, yes." "I could pick you up after your shift," Elias suggested. "There's somewhere I'd like to take you." Naomi agreed, curious about what Elias had planned. They parted with a lingering look, but no physical contact. Elias still seemed cautious about touching in public, and Naomi didn't want to push him. As Elias's car pulled away, Naomi noticed a familiar figure across the street, watching them. It was Jessica Winters, elegant as always in a tailored pantsuit. She gave Naomi a small nod before walking away, leaving Naomi to wonder if the encounter had been coincidental or if Jessica was keeping tabs on them both. Later that day, as Naomi was preparing for her shy FT, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Ms. Ellis, this is Thomas Crane," said the voice on the other end. Naomi sat down on her bed, suddenly nervous. "Mr. Crane, how did you get my number?" "I have my ways," Thomas replied, which wasn't reassuring. "I'd like to meet with you before my flight this afternoon. There are some matters we should discuss regarding my son." Every instinct told Naomi to refuse. Booty curiosity won out. When and where? The bar at the Four Seasons, 4 o'clock. Thomas hung up without waiting for her agreement, leaving Naomi staring at her phone in disbelief. She checked the time. It was just past 1 p.m., giving her plenty of time to meet Thomas before her shift. But should she? And should she tell Elias about the call? After some deliberation, Naomi decided to meet with Thomas, but not to tell Elias yet. Whatever Thomas wanted to disc, says she would hear him out first. At exactly 4 p.m., Naomi walked into the elegant bar of the Four Seasons Hotel, feeling distinctly out of place in her simple jeans and sweater. Thomas Crane was already there, sitting at a corner table with a glass of scotch in front of him. "Ms. Ellis," he greeted her, standing politely as she approached. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Naomi took the offered seat, declining the waiter's offer of a drink. "What did you want to discuss, Mr. Crane?" Thomas studied her for a moment, his expression inscrutable. "You're direct. I appreciate that quality." "I have limited time before my shift," Naomi replied, "and I imagine you do too before your flight." "Indeed," Thomas said with a slight nod. "Very well, I'll be equally direct. What are your intentions toward my son?" The question was so similar to Jessica's that Naomi almost laughed. "Your son is a grown man, Mr. Crane. My intentions, as you call them, are between him and me." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly at her boldness. "Perhaps I should rephrase. Are you aware of my son's worth, of what being associated with the Crane name means?" "If you're asking if I'm after Elias's money, the answer is no," Naomi said firmly. "I'm not interested in his wealth or his name." "Everyone says that," Thomas replied dismissively, "but reality has a way of changing people's principles. Elias is vulnerable right now. He hasn't been close to anyone since Rebecca." "I know about Rebecca," Naomi said softly. "Elias told me." This seemed to surprise Thomas. "Did he? That's unexpected." It took him years to even say her name after the accident. "Mr. Crane," Naomi said, leaning forward slightly, "I understand your concern for your son, but I'm not a threat to him or to your company. We're friends, that's all." "Friends," Thomas repeated skeptically. "Ms. Ellis, I've been in business for over 40 years. I know when someone is not being entirely forthcoming." Naomi felt her cheeks warm. "Fine, I care about Elias, as more than a friend, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm not interested in his money." Thomas nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. Then, to her surprise, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a check, sliding it across the table to her. $500,000, he said casually, "to walk away now before things get complicated." Naomi stared at the check in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Entirely," Thomas replied. "Consider it compensation for your time and whatever emotional attachment you may have begun to form. A clean break now would be best for everyone involved." The shock gave way to anger as Naomi pushed the check back toward him. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Crane, and knight her is whatever is developing between me and Elias." "Everyone has a price, Ms. Ellis," Thomas persisted. "Perhaps 500,000 is too low. Let's say 1 million. Think of what that could do for you, for your mother in Detroit." The mention of her mother sent a chill through Naomi. "How do you know about my mother?" Thomas waved a hand dismissively. "I make it my business to know everything about people who get close to my family. Your mother is a waitress at Buddy's Diner in Detroit. She's behind on her rent, has medical bills for her arthritis. and works double shifts despite being in pain most days. The detailed knowledge of her mother's situation disturbed Naomi deeply. "Stay away from my mother," she said, her voice low but intense. "I have no interest in your mother," Thomas assured her. "I'm simply pointing out that $1 million could change both your lives. You could finish your education without working 2 jobs. Your mother could retire in comfort. All you have to do is walk away from Elias." Naomi stood up, unable to listen anymore. "I'm leaving now, Mr. Crane, and I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened. But if you ever threaten my family again, even indirectly, I will tell Elias everything. I doubt your relationship could survive that." Thomas remained seated, watching her with an unreadable expression. "You're making a mistake, Ms. Ellis. The world my son lives in will crush someone like you." "Maybe," Naomi conceded, "but that's for me to find out, not for you to decide." As she turned to leave, Thomas called after her. "He'll go back to New York, you know. His life is there. His responsibilities are there. This Chicago interlude is just that, an interlude." Naomi paused but didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Mr. Crane. Have a safe flight." She walked out of the bar with her head high, but once outside, she had to stop and take several deep breaths to calm her racing heart. The encounter with Thomas had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not because of the money. She had meant what she said about not being for sale, but because of the doubt he had tried to plant about her place in Elias' world. Was Thomas right? Was whatever was growing between her and Elias doomed by the differences in their lives? And should she tell Elias about his father's attempt to buy her off? These questions swirled in her mind as she made her way to the Grand Lakeside for her shift. The hotel seemed different now, the luxury that had once impressed her now a reminder of the gulf between her world and Elias'. Marcus noticed her distraction immediately. "Everything okay, Ellis? You seem a million miles away." "I'm fine," Naomi assured him, tying her apron with practiced movements. "Just a low tea on my mind. Well, focus up. The conference is still going on and we're short-staffed tonight." The busy shift was actually a relief, giving Naomi less time to dwell on her meeting with Thomas. But as midnight approached, her anxiety returned. Elias would be picking her up after her shift, and she still hadn't decided whether to tell him about his father's offer. At precisely 12:01 a.m., as Naomi was hanging up her apron in the staff room, her phone buzzed with a text from Elias. "Outside whenever you're ready." She found him waiting in the same black car from this morning, but this time he was behind the wheel himself. "Are you drive?" she asked as she slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool and smooth beneath her. "Occasionally," Elias replied with a small smile, "when I want privacy." He pulled smoothly into traffic, heading north away from downtown Chicago. Naomi watched his profile in the dim light of the dashboard, noting the ease with which he handled the expensive car. "Where are we going?" she finally asked as they left the city behind. "You'll see," Elias said mysteriously. "It's not far." About 20 minutes later, he turned onto a narrow road that wound through a wooded area before emerging at the edge of Lake Michigan. A small, private beach stretched before them, empty at this late hour, the moonlight creating a silvery path across the dark water. Elias parked and came around to open Naomi's door, offering his hand to help her out. She took it, feeling the now familiar warmth of his skin against hers. "What is this place?" she asked as they walked toward the shore. "It belongs to Crane Technologies," Elias explained. "Her corporate retreat for executives, but no one uses it this time of year." They reached a wooden deck that extended slightly over the water. Elias had clearly planned ahead, and here was a small table set up with a thermos, 2 mugs, and a covered plate. "Hot chocolate and cookies," he said, suddenly looking boyishly uncertain. "I remembered you saying you loved both." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Naomi deeply. "This is perfect," she said softly. They sat at the table, and Elias poured the hot chocolate. The night was cool but not cold, the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore creating a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "I had breakfast with my father this morning," Elias said after a while. "It was the first real conversation we've had in years, not just about business but about life. About my mother, about Rebecca, about you. Naomi tensed slightly at the mention of Thomas. What did you tell him about me? The truth, Elias replied simply. That you're the first person since Rebecca who makes me feel like myself again. The first person who doesn't, and make me feel broken. Naomi looked down at her mug, guilt washing over her. Elias, there's something I need to tell you. She explained about Thomas's call, the meeting at the Four Seasons, the offer of money to walk away. As she spoke, Elias's expression darkened, his hand tightening around his mug. I'm so sorry, he said when she finished. I never thought he would do something like that. I should have known better. It's not your fault, Naomi assured him. And for what it's worth, I told him I wasn't for sale. Elias reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you for telling me, for standing up to him, for staying. The vulnerability in his voice made Naomi's heart ache. I'm not going anywhere, Elias, not unless you want me to. I don't, he said firmly. In fact, I want quite the opposite. He stood and walked to the edge of the deck, staring out at the moonlit lake. Naomi joined High M, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. 9 years ago, I lost the person I thought I would spend my life with, Elias said, his voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. After that, I didn't think I would ever feel anything again. I didn't want to. Feeling nothing was better than feeling that kind
of pain. He turned to face her, his blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. And then you crashed into me, spilled food all over my expensive suite, and somehow ... woke me up. Naomi smiled at the memory of their first meeting. Not my most graceful moment. It was perfect, Elias disagreed, because it was real. You were real. No agenda, no pretense. Just you, apologizing for the mess and looking at me like I was just a person, not Elias Crane of Crane Technologies. You are just a person to me, Naomi said. A person I've come to care about very much. Elias took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I'm leaving for New York on Sunday. But before I go, I wanted to bring you here, to show you this place that's always brought me peace, and to ask you something. What? Naomi prompted when he hesitated. Will you wait for me? Elias asked, the words rushing out as if he feared he might lose his nerve. I know it's a lot to ask. We've only known each other for a few weeks. But I feel like ... this could be something important. Something worth waiting for. The sincerity in his eyes, the hope in his voice. Naomi felt overwhelmed by the emotions he stirred in her. Part of her wanted to be cautious, to remind herself of the differences between them, of Thomas's warnings. But a stronger part recognized that what was happening between them was rare and precious. Yes, she said simply, I'll wait. But you have to promise me something too. Anything, Elias replied immediately. Promise me you won't retreat again, Naomi said. Don't go back to being the recluse who doesn't let anyone in. Even when you're in New York, even when we're apart, stay present in the world. Elias smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. I promise, and to prove I too. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But Naomi didn't move, her heart pounding as Elias's lips met hers in a gentle, hesitant kiss. It was brief, almost chaste, but the significance of it, the first time Elias had kissed anyone in 9 years, made it more meaningful than any kiss Naomi had ever experienced. When they pulled apart, Elias looked both terrified and exhilarated. I've been wanting to do that since the night you told me off for calling you the help, he admitted. Naomi laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. That long? And here I thought you were just interested in my sparkling conversation. That too, Elias assured her, his hand finding hers again. Definitely that too. They stayed at the lake for another hour, talking and sharing the cookies, planning when Naomi would visit New York and when Elias would return to Chicago. The future that had seemed so uncertain just hours ago now stretched before it, full of possibilities. When Elias finally drove Naomi home, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. He walked her to her apartment door, both of them reluctant for the night to end. "I'll pick you up tomorrow night," Elias suggested. "We still have Saturday before I leave." "I'd like that," Naomi agreed, "but maybe somewhere less fancy this time. I want to show you my Chicago." "Your Chicago sounds perfect," Elias said, leaning in for another brief kiss before reluctantly stepping back. "Good night, Naomi Ellis." "Good night, Elias Crane," she replied with a smile, the way she had that first night in room 917. As Elias drove back to the hotel, his phone rang through the car's speaker system. It was Jessica. "It's 5 Amen," he answered. "This better be important." "It is," Jessica replied, her voice tense. "Your father just called me. He's delaying his return to New York, says he has unfinished business in Chicago." Elias's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Did he mention what kind of unfinished business? "No," Jessica said. "But after what Naomi told you about their meeting, I'm concerned." "So am I," Elias admitted. "Keep an eye on him, Jessica. I don't trust him to leave this alone." "Already on it," Jessica assured him. "And Elias? For what it's worth, I think your father is wrong about her. She's good for you." Rebecca would have approved. The mention of Rebecca's name no longer sent a stab of pain through Elias's heart. Instead, he felt a gentle warmth, like an old friend's blessing. "Thank you, Jessica," he said softly. "That means a lot." As he pulled into the hotel parking garage, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that his father's continued presence in Chicago was a threat to his newfound happiness. Thomas Crane rarely gave up once he had set his mind on something. And it was clear he had set his mind on separating Elias from Naomi. What Elias didn't know was that Thomas was already putting a new plan into motion, one that wouldn't involve money, but something far more insidious: doubt. Thomas sat in his hotel room, phone in hand, scrolling through the detailed background report on Naomi Ellis. There was nothing scandalous there, nothing he could use to discredit her directly. But perhaps that wasn't necessary. Perhaps all he needed to do was remind his son of the reality of their different worlds and the inevitable pain that would come from trying to bridge them. He dialed a number, waiting only briefly before a female voice answered. "Olivia," Thomas greeted warmly. "How would you like to attend a charity gala in Chicago tomorrow night? There's someone I'd like you to meet. Or rather, someone I'd like you to help me remind of his obligations. Olivia Bradford, daughter O. F. Thomas's oldest friend and long considered by both fathers as a suitable match for Elias, agreed immediately. She had been pursuing Elias Crane for years, undeterred by his reclusiveness. This unexpected opportunity was too good to pass up. Thomas hung up with a satisfied smile. Elias might think he wanted a simple life with a waitress from Chicago, but Thomas knew better. His son belonged in their world, the world of wealth, power, and carefully cultivated connections. And Thomas would do whatever it took to remind him of that fact. Meanwhile, Naomi was too happy to sleep despite her exhaustion. She curled up on her small sofa with a cup of tea, replaying the events of the night in her mind. Elias had kissed her, had asked her to wait for him, had promised to stay connected to the world to her, even when they were apart. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. But as the first rays of sunlight filtered through her apartment windows, a small doubt began to creep in. Thomas's words echoed in her mind. "The world my son lives in will crush someone like you." Was he right? Could someone like her really fit into Elias's world of private jets and lakeside retreats? Or was she setting herself up for heartbreak? Naomi pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on the memory of Elias's kiss, the warmth of his hand in hers, the promise in his eyes when he asked her to wait for him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Of that much, she was certain. What she couldn't know was that the biggest test of their newfound connection was already being set in motion. Scheduled to unfold at a charity gala the very next night, a gala Elias had reluctantly agreed to attend with his father as a gesture of their reconciliation. A gala where Thomas planned to remind his son exactly where he belonged, and it wasn't with a waitress from the Grand Lakeside Hotel, no matter how genuine her feelings might be. Saturday evening arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread for Elias. He had promised Naomi he would pick her up at 7 p.m. to experience her Chicago, a tour of her favorite local spots, far from the luxury he was accustomed to. It was an evening he had been looking forward to all day, but now there was a complication. His father had called that morning, reminding Elias of the charity gala benefiting Chicago's Children's Hospital, an event Thomas had suddenly decided they should attend together as a show of family unity. "It's important, Elias," Thomas had insisted. "The Crane Foundation is a major donor. Your absence would be noticed and questioned." Elias had tried to explain that he already had plans, but Thomas was relentless. After a tense conversation, they had reached a compromise. Elias would make an appearance at the gala for 1 hour, from 8 to 9 p.m., and then leave to meet Naomi. Now, as Elias adjusted his bow tie in the mirror, he wondered if he should have simply refused his father. But the newly rekindled relationship with Thomas felt fragile, and Elias didn't want to damage it over a scheduling conflict. He picked up his phone and called Naomi. "Hey," she answered, sounding happy to hear from him. "I'm just deciding which of my 2 decent outfits to wear tonight." "About tonight," Elias began, already feeling guilty. "There's been a slight change of plans." He explained about the gala and the compromise he'd reached with his father. "I'll pick you up at 9:30 instead of 7. Is that okay?" There was a pause before Naomi responded. "Of course. I understand." "I'm really sorry," Elias said, hearing the disappointment she was trying to hide. "I promised my father just 1 hour. I'll leave at 9 sh. I swear. It's fine, Elias," Naomi assured him. "Your father is important to you." "I get it." After they hung up, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a mistake. But it was too late to change plans now. The car was already waiting to take him to the gala. What Elias didn't know was that across town, Thomas was also preparing for the evening, but with very different intentions. Olivia Bradford had arrived in Chicago that afternoon, and D. Thomas had spent an hour briefing her on his concerns about Elias' infatuation with a hotel waitress. "You've always been good for him, Olivia," Thomas said as they rode to the gala together. "He respects you, values your opinion. If you could just remind him of the world he belongs in, the responsibilities he has." Olivia nodded, smoothing the skirt of her designer gown. At 32, she was strikingly beautiful, with long red hair and the confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. She had been interested in Elias for years, but had respected his grief after Rebecca's death. Now, however, Thomas was suggesting that Elias was ready to move on, just not with the right person. "I'll do what I can, Thomas," she promised, "but I won't manipulate him. If Elias has feelings for this woman, they need to be addressed honestly." Thomas waved a hand dismissively. "It's not manipulation to remind Simeone of reality. Elias can't build a life with a waitress. Their worlds are too different. He'd be miserable, and so would she." Olivia wasn't entirely convinced, but she had agreed to come, curious to see for herself what had drawn Elias out of his shell after all these years. Meanwhile, Naomi sat in her apartment, trying not to feel disappointed by the change of plans. She understood the pressure Elias faced from his father, the obligations that came with his name and position. This was just a small taste of what their relationship would involve if it continued to grow. To distract herself, she decided to work on her blog, updating a review of a small neighborhood bakery she had visited earlier that week. As she wrote, her phone pinged with a notification. Curious, she checked it and gasped. Her blog, which normally received a few dozen visitors a day at most, was suddenly exploding with traffic. Hundreds. Then thousands of new readers were viewing her posts. Comments were pouring in, many from verified accounts of well-known food critics and magazine editors. A text message from Elias followed. "I may have sent your blog to a few people. Hope that's okay." Naomi laughed in disbelief. A few people was clearly an understatement. She called him immediately. "What did you do?" she demanded when he answered. "Just shared a blog I admire with some industry contacts," Elias replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Is that a problem?" "Elias, I have editors from Food and Wine and Bon Appetit leaving comments," Naomi exclaimed. "The managing editor of Chicago Dining Monthly just emailed me about a potential contributor position." "Good," Elias said simply. "Your work deserves to be seen, Naomi. I just provided the audience. The talent is all yours." Naomi was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by his support. "Thank you," she finally managed. "This is incredible." "You're welcome," Elias replied. "Now I have to go. My father just arrived at the hotel. But I'll see you at 9:30, and you can tell me more about these opportunities then." The call ended, and Naomi sat staring at her computer screen, watching as her dream of becoming a legitimate food writer suddenly seemed possible. She had always believed that talent and hard work would eventually get her there, but she had to admit that Elias's connections had just accelerated the process by years. Was this a glimpse of the benefits of Elias's world? Or was it a dangerous precedent, making her dependent on his influence and status? These thoughts swirled in her mind as she got ready for their evening. Choosing her nicer outfit, a simple burgundy dress that was modest but flattering. She wanted to look good for Elias, but a part of her also wanted to prove to herself that she could belong in his world at least a little bit. At the charity gala, Elias stood near the bar, checking his watch repeatedly. It was 8:30 p.m. 30 more minutes and he could politely leave to meet Naomi. He had already done his duty, greeted the hospital board, posed for photos with his father, written a sizable personal check for the cause. "Elias, is that really you at a social event?" a feminine voice asked from behind him. He turned to find Olivia Bradford smiling at him, looking as elegant as ever in an emerald green gown that complemented her red hair perfectly. "Olivia," he said, genuinely surprised. "I didn't know you were in Chicago." "Last-minute trip," she replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Your father mentioned this gala, and I thought it would be nice to see you. It's been, what, 2 years?" "At least," Elias agreed, giving her a polite kiss on the cheek. He and Olivia had known each other since childhood, their families connected through business and social circles. There had been a time, before he met Rebecca, when everyone had assumed they would eventually marry. But Elias had never felt more than friendship for Olivia, despite her subtle hints over the years that she might welcome something more. "You're looking well," Olivia observed, studying his face. "There's something different about you. Liss haunted." Elias smiled slightly. "I've been told I seem more present lately." "I'm glad," Olivia said sincerely. "After Rebecca, we were all so worried about you. You just disappeared." "I needed time," Elias said simply. 9 years is more than time, Elias. It's a lifetime. Olivia placed her hand on his arm. "We've missed you. I've missed you." Across the room, Thomas watched their interaction with satisfaction. Olivia was playing her part, perfectly reminding Elias of the world they shared, the history and connections that bound them. She was exactly the kind of woman Elias should be with, someone who understood their world, who wouldn't be overwhelmed by the Crane name and fortune. Elias, however, was checking his watch again. 8:45 p.m. 15 more minutes. "Are you late for something?" Olivia asked, noticing the gesture. "I have plans at 9, Elias admitted. "I only promised my father an hour chair. Important plans?" Olivia pressed, her curiosity evident. Elias hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Yes, important to me, at least." "A woman?" Olivia guessed, her smile faltering slightly. Before Elias could respond, Thomas appeared beside them, his timing as impeccable as always. "Olivia, you look stunning as usual," he said, kissing her cheek. "I see you and Elias have reconnected. Wonderful." The implication in his tone was clear, and Elias felt a flash of irritation. "Father, it's almost 9. I need to leave soon." "Nonsense," Thomas dismissed. "The hospital director is about to give his speech. We're being recognized for our contribution." "You can't possibly leave now." Elias felt trapped. Publicly walking out during the recognition of their donation would create exactly the kind of scene he had been avoiding for years. It would reflect poorly not just on him, but on the Crane Foundation and the hospital's fundraising efforts. "Fine," he conceded. "But immediately after the speech, I'm leaving." Thomas nodded, satisfied. Of course. Just the speech. "Olivia, would you mind keeping Elias company? I need to speak with the mayor briefly." As Thomas walked away, Elias pulled out his phone to text Naomi that he might be a few minutes late. But before he could send a message, the lights dimmed and the hospital director took the stage. Reluctantly, Elias pocketed his phone again. The delay would only be a few minutes. The director's speech, however, was not brief. He spoke at length about the importance of philanthropy, the hospital's new wing funded by donations, and the specific contributions of key supporters. When he finally called Thomas and Elias Crane to the stage to present them with a plaque, it was already 9:20 p.m. Elias accepted the plaque with a tight smile, said a few appropriate words of thanks, and then made his exit from the stage as quickly as politeness allowed. he headed straight for.
The door, ignoring his father's attempts to introduce him to more people. "Elias, wait!" Olivia called, catching up to him near the exit. "You're really leaving? The gala's just getting started." "I have somewhere important to be," Elias replied, checking his phone. No messages from Naomi, but he was already 20 minutes late. "More important than this?" Olivia gestured around at the glittering crowd. "Than the people who have supported you, who understand your life and responsibilities." Elias looked at her, really looked at her for the first time that evening. "Yes, Olivia, more important to me than all of this. It's her, isn't it? The waitress your father mentioned." Elias's expression hardened. "Her name is Naomi, and yes, I'm meeting her." Olivia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Elias, be realistic. What future could you possibly have with someone from that world? She won't understand your life-e, the pressures you face, the expectations. She'll always feel out of place, and you'll always feel guilty for putting her in situations she's not prepared for." "So you don't know her," Elias said firmly, "and neither does my father." "I know how cruel our world can be to outsiders," Olivia persisted. "The scrutiny, the judgment, the constant speculation about motives. Is that what you want for her? Because that's what she'll face as Elias cranes. Whatever she is to you." The words hit closer to home than Elias wanted to admit. He had been so focused on his own healing, on the way Naomi made him feel, that he hadn't fully considered what being associated with him would mean for her. "I have to go," he said, turning toward the door again. "Just think about it, Elias," Olivia called after him. "Is it fair to drag her into this life, or are you being selfish, thinking only of what she does for you, not what your world will do to her?" Elias paused, Olivia's words echoing uncomfortably in his mind. But then he thought of Naomi, her strength, her determination, her authentic spirit that had pulled him back into the land of the living. She deserved better than to be kept waiting while he second-guessed their connection. Without another word to Olivia, he walked out of the gala and into the night. Naomi checked her phone again. 9:45 p.m. Still no message from Elias. She had been ready since 9, waiting in her apartment, excitement gradually giving way to concern and then to a nagging doubt. Had something happened? Or had Elias simply become caught up in his father's world again, forgetting their plans? She was about to call him when there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Elias stood there, slightly out of breath as if he had run up the stairs. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately. The speech ran long, and then I couldn't get away from people, and then there was traffic. "It's okay," Naomi interrupted, relieved to see him. "You're here now." Elias stepped into her apartment, taking in the modest space with genuine interest. This was Naomi's world, small but comfortable, decorated with food magazine cutouts and colorful throw pillows, books stacked on every available surface. "I like your place," he said, and Naomi could tell he meant it. "It feels like you." "Thanks," she replied, suddenly self-conscious about the creaky floorboards and the water stain on the ceiling. "It's not much, but it's home." "It's perfect," Elias insisted. Then, noticing her dress, he added, "You look beautiful." Naomi smiled, some of her earlier tension fading. "Thank you. So, are you ready to see my Chicago? It's not fancy, but it's real." "Lead the way," Elias said, offering his arm. Naomi had planned a night of her favorite Loca L spots, a hole-in-the-wall taco place with the best food in the city, a small jazz club where the musicians knew her by name, a tiny bakery that stayed open late and served incredible desserts. It was a world away from the charity gala Elias had just left, and he found himself relaxing more with each stop. At the jazz club, as they sat at a small table near the back, nursing drinks and listening to the music, Naomi finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "How was the gala?" Elias sighed. "Predictable. Lots of rich people congratulating themselves on their generosity." "And your father? How was he?" "Exactly as expected," Elias replied. "Oh, and he invited an old family friend, Olivia Bradford, someone he's been trying to set me up with for years." Naomi tensed slightly. "I see, and how was that reunion?" Elias took her hand across the table. "Illuminating, actually. It made me realize something important. What's that? Naomi asked, trying to keep her voice casual. That I don't belong in that world anymore, Elias said simply. Or at least, not only in that world. For 9 years, I've been going through the motions, doing what was expected of me while keeping myself numb and distant. But that's not living, Naomi. What we're doing right now, this is living. The sincerity in his voice made Naomi's heart swell. But she couldn't quite shake the do-you-bt that had been planted by Thomas's words and amplified by her own insecurities. Elias, your world and mine are very different, she said carefully. Tonight is nice, but can you really see yourself being happy in places like this long-term? And can you honestly say you think I would fit into your world of galas and board meetings? Elias was quiet for a moment, considering her question seriously. I think the better question is, can we create a world together that has elements of both? Because I don't want to go back to living exclusively in that bubble of privilege and isolation, but I also can't completely escape the responsibilities I have. I don't want you to give up who you are, Naomi clarified. I just worry that the differences between us might eventually become too much to overcome. Differences can be strengths, Naomi, Elias replied. Your perspective, your experiences, they're valuable precisely because they're different from mine. You see the world in ways I never could, and that's refreshing, necessary even. Naomi squeezed his hand, touched by his words, but still not entirely convinced. What about your father? He made it pretty clear he doesn't approve of me. My father will have to accept my choices, Elias said firmly. I respect him, and I value our relationship, but I won't let him dictate my personal life. Not anymore. The conversation paused as the jazz quartet finished their set, and the small audience applauded. One of the musicians waved at Naomi, and she waved back with a smile. So you're really known here, Elias observed. I've been coming since I moved to Chicago, Naomi explained. I wrote a blog post about them last year, and they've kind of adopted me since then. Speaking of your blog, Elias said, have you heard anything more from those editors? Naomi's face lit up. Yes, the Chicago Dining Monthly editor wants to meet on Monday to discuss a regular column, and Food and Wine requested samples for a possible freelance position. It's incredible, Elias, thank you. Don't thank me, he insisted. I just made some introductions. Your talent did the rest. They left the jazz club and walked to the bakery, the night air cool but pleasant. As they strolled, Elias's phone rang. He checked the screen and sighed. It's my father. I should take this. Naomi nodded, giving him some privacy by walking a few steps ahead. She could hear only Elias's side of the conversation, but his tone made it clear that the call wasn't pleasant. Yes, father. I left early. No, it wasn't negotiable. I understand your disappointment, but my decisions stand. We can discuss this tomorrow before I leave for New York. When he hung up, Elias looked tense again. Naomi walked back to him, concerned. Everything okay? My father is displeased with my early departure, Elias explained. He's questioning my commitment to the company, to the family name. I'm sorry, Naomi said softly. I don't want to cause problems between you and your father. You're not the cause, Naomi, Elias assured her. This tension has existed for years. It's just coming to a head now, because I'm finally starting to make my own choices. They reached the bakery, a tiny storefront with warm yellow light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, the aroma of fresh bread and pastries enveloped them. The elderly woman behind the counter greeted Naomi by name, her face crinkling with a warm smile. Naomi, my favorite customer, and you brought a friend. Mrs. Petrovich, this is Elias, Naomi introduced. Elias, Mrs. Petrovich makes the best almond croissants in Chicago. In the world, young lady, the woman corrected with a wink. In the world. They sat at a small table by the window, sharing a plate of pastries and cups of strong coffee. The simple pleasure of the moment, good food, warm surroundings, easy conversation, seemed to ease the tension from Elias's shoulders. This is perfect, he said, looking around the cozy bakery. Thank you for showing me your Chicago. Thank you for wanting to see it, Naomi replied. Most people in your position wouldn't care about places like His. Most people in my position don't know what they're missing, Elias said. Then, more seriously, Naomi, there's something I need to ask you. What is it? she asked, sensing the shift in his tone. Tomorrow I go back to New York, Elias began. We've talked about you visiting, about me coming back to Chicago, but I've been thinking, what if there was another option? Naomi waited, curious about where he was going with this. What if you came with me, Elias suggested. Not just for a visit, but to stay. I could help you find an apartment, introduce you to food editors there. New York is the center of the publishing world. Your career could really take off. The offer took Naomi by surprise. You want me to move to New York? Elias, that's a huge step. We've only known each other for a few weeks. I know it sounds crazy, Elias admitted, but when you know something is right, why wait? The past weeks have been the most alive I've felt in 9 years. I don't want to go back to New York and risk losing that feeling, losing you. Naomi was speechless. Part of her was thrilled by the offer, by the possibility of being with Elias and pursuing her writing career in New York. But another part was cautious, aware of how dramatic a change this would be. What about my mother? She asked. My responsibilities here, I can't just drop everything and move across the country. Your mother could come too if that's what you want, Elias said earnestly. I have more than enough space, or we could find her a place in New York, help with her medical bills. As for your jobs and classes here, I'm sure we could find equivalents in New York. Elias, I can't let you support me and my mother, Naomi protested. That's too much. It's not about supporting you, Elias clarified. It's about removing obstacles. You have talent, Naomi. Real talent. With the right opportunities, you could build an amazing career. I just want to help create those opportunities. Naomi felt overwhelmed. The practical part of her knew that moving to New York would open doors for her writing career that might take years to access otherwise. But the independent part of her, the part that had worked so hard for everything she had, resisted the idea of having her path smoothed by Elias's wealth and connections. I don't know, she finally said. It's a lot to take in. Elias reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not asking for an answer right now. Just think about it. My flight isn't until tomorrow evening. We have time to talk more. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation and laughter as they finished their tour of Naomi's favorite spots. By the time Elias drove her back to her apartment, it was nearly 2 a.m. I had a wonderful time, he said as they stood at her door. Thank you for sharing your world with me. Thank you for wanting to be part of it, Naomi replied softly. Their kiss goodnight was longer than the one they had shared at the lake, deeper and more certain. When they finally pulled apart, Elias's eyes were bright with emotion. Think about New York, he reminded her. We could build something real there together. After he left, Naomi sat on her sofa, her mind racing. Moving to New York with Elias was tempting, a chance at both love and career advancement. But was it the right choice? Was she ready for such a dramatic change? She was still awake at dawn, weighing her options, when her phone rang. It was her mother. Mama, is everything okay? Naomi asked, immediately concerned by the early call. Everything's fine, baby, Loretta Ellis assured her. Better than fine, actually. I just got the strangest call from someone at the Crane Foundation. They're offering me a full medical coverage plan and a grant to go back to school if I want to. Said it was part of some new program for single parents. Do you know anything about this? Naomi closed her eyes, a mix of emotions washing over her. Elias had done this, reached out to help her mother without telling her, despite her insistence that she didn't want his charity. It's a long story, Mama, Naomi said. But I think you should accept it. After talking with her mother for a while longer, Naomi made a decision. She showered, dressed, and headed not to work, but to the Grand Lakeside Hotel. She had something important to say to Elias, and it couldn't wait. When she arrived at the hotel, however, the front desk informed her that Mr. Crane had checked out early that morning. Panic washed over her. Had he left for New York already, without saying goodbye? Did he leave a message for me? She asked desperately. Naomi Ellis? The desk clerk checked the system and shook his head. I'm sorry, Miss Ellis, no messages. Disappointed and confused, Naomi was about to leave when a familiar voice called her name. It was Jessica Winters, looking as elegant as ever in a tailored suit despite the early hour. Naomi, Jessica said, approaching her. I was hoping to catch you. Elias asked me to give you this if you came looking for him. She handed Naomi an envelope, then smiled knowingly. He's not gone yet, by the way, just moved to a different hotel to avoid his father. He's at the Drake, room 525. Thank you, Naomi said gratefully. But why are you helping me? I thought you'd be on Mr. Crane's side. Jessica's expression softened. I made a promise to Rebecca years ago to help Elias find happiness again. I'm just keeping that promise. With directions from Jessica, Naomi headed to the Drake Hotel. When she knocked on the door of room 525, Elias opened it almost immediately, his face lighting up at the sight of her. Naomi, I was just about to call you. I'm sorry for leaving the Grand Lakeside without telling you, but after another argument with my father this morning, you set up a foundation grant for my mother, Naomi interrupted, unable to contain herself any longer. Elias looked slightly guilty. I know you said no charity, but this is different. It's a legitimate foundation program. Your mother qualifies based on her situation, not because of any connection to you. Elias, Naomi said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. I've been thinking all night about your offer to come to New York. And? He asked, hope and apprehension mingling in his expression. And I've decided that I can't come to New York, Naomi said firmly. Elias's face fell. I understand. It was too much, too soon. I shouldn't have... Let me finish, Naomi interrupted again. I can't come to New York yet. I need to do things my way, on my own terms. I need to finish my degree here in Chicago, keep building my blog, see if this opportunity with Chicago Dining Monthly leads somewhere. I need to stand on my own feet before I can stand beside you in your world. Understanding dawned in Elias's eyes. You're not saying no. You're saying, not right now. Exactly, Naomi confirmed. I want to be with you, Elias, but I want to be your equal, not someone you rescued or elevated. When I come to New York, if I come to New York, I want it to be because I've earned my place there, not because you created it for me. Elias took her hands in his, relief washing over his features. I can respect that. More than respect it, I admire it. It's exactly the kind of strength and independence that I admire in you. The almost spoken word hung between them, too significant to ignore. Were you about to say what I think you were about to say? Naomi asked softly. Elias took a deep breath. I was, and it's probably too soon, and maybe I'm rushing things again, but I think I'm falling in love with you, Naomi Ellis. I think I started falling the moment you crashed into me and spilled room service all over my expensive suite. Naomi laughed, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. Well, I think I'm falling in love with you too, Elias Crane, even though you're stubborn and overprotective, and way too quick to throw money at problems. Those are my best qualities, Elias protested with a smile. No, Naomi said seriously. Your best qualities are your kindness, your honesty, and the way you look at me like I'm the most important person in the room. Elias pulled her closer. You are the most important person in any room as far as I'm concerned. Their kiss was a promise of patience, of respect for each other's independence, of a future they would build together at their own pace. Later, as they sat together on the hotel balcony watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan, Elias asked, "So what happens now?" "Now," Naomi replied, "we do the hard part. We build something real, something that bridges our two worlds without requiring either of us to abandon who we are." "Long distance?" Elias clarified. "For now," Naomi agreed. "You in New York, me in Chicago, but we visit, we talk, we make it work until the time is right for more." "And my father?" Elias asked. "We deal with him together," Naomi said firmly. "No more secret meetings or offers of money to walk away." Elias nodded, his expression serious. "I'll talk to him before I leave. Make it clear that you're part of my life now, whether he approves or not." As if on cue, Elias's phone rang. The screen showed his father's name. This time, instead of answering it alone, Elias put the call on speaker so Naomi could hear. "Good morning, Father," Elias greeted calmly. "Elias?" Thomas's voice was tense. "Jessica tells me you've checked out of the Grand Lakeside and moved to the Drake. May I ask why?" "I needed some space," Elias replied. and I wanted to avoid another argument about my personal choices. Your personal choices affect the company, Elias, Thomas insisted. The Crane name stands for something. Yes, it does, Elias agreed. And I intend to honor that name by living an authentic life, not just going through the motions. That includes my relationship with Naomi. There was a pause before Thomas spoke again. She's there with you, isn't she? Yes, I am, Mr. Crane, Naomi answered, squeezing Elias's hand for support. Another, longer pause followed. When Thomas spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. Ms. Ellis, I see my son has made his choice clear. He has, Naomi confirmed, and so have I. But I want you to know that I'm not trying to take Elias away from his responsibilities or his family. I just want him to be happy, truly happy, not just functioning. And you think you're the key to his happiness? Thomas asked, the skepticism evident in his voice. No, Naomi replied honestly. Elias is the key to his own happiness. I'm just someone who sees him clearly and cares about him deeply. The line was quiet for so long that they thought Thomas might have hung up. Finally, he spoke again. Elias, the board meeting is at 10 a.m. on Monday. I expect you to be there, prepared and focused. I will be, Elias promised. Good, Thomas said shortly. And Ms. Ellis, perhaps we could start again when Elias next brings you to New York, a proper dinner instead of an ambush at a hotel bar. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall of Thomas's opposition. I'd like that, Mr. Crane, Naomi replied. After the call ended, Elias looked at Naomi with a mixture of amazement and pride. I've never heard anyone handle my father so diplomatically. I was a waitress at a luxury hotel for SIX months, Naomi reminded him with a smile. I know how to deal with difficult customers. Elias laughed, pulling her into his arms. I'm going to miss you, he said, suddenly serious again. New York is going to feel empty without you. Then you'll just have to visit Chicago often, Naomi replied, and I promise to come to New York when I can. We'll make it work, Elias. One day at a time. As they stood together on the balcony, watching the city come to life below them, Naomi thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, a simple room service delivery that had turned into so much more. She had crashed into Elias Crane's carefully isolated life and shattered his silence. And in return, he had shown her possibilities she had never imagined for herself. Their worlds were different, yes. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. But standing there in the morning light with Elias's arms around her and his heart finally open to the future, Naomi knew that they had found something rare and precious, a connection worth fighting for, a love worth waiting for. And room 917, where it all began, would always be there. A reminder of how sometimes the most unexpected collisions can lead to the most beautiful beginnings.